finally got your first leadership gig, loving the new role, but feeling the pressure of your new responsibilities and all that expectation to perform? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. Crossing the chasm from a technical role to leadership, from doing stuff to managing and leading people, is the toughest challenge any leader must make. Welcome to the Human Edge Show, the podcast dedicated to help you do just that, successfully cross the doing to leading chasm. Campbell Such here, Chief Chasm Crossing Guide. I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. I want to help you learn those lessons much more easily by sharing my experiences and talking with brilliant people who have already figured it out. You'll get great actionable tips, strategies, and techniques to make the transition so much easier and faster for you. Now let's get to it. Welcome to another episode of the Human Edge Show. Today I'm honoured to have Misti Landtroop on the show with me. Misti, great to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Campbell, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Misti is the New Zealand Managing Director for Palo Alto Networks. She's passionate about protecting all New Zealanders' way of life in the digital age by working to ensure each day is safer and more secure than the one before. Misti is a proud dual citizen of New Zealand and the United States. She spent nearly 20 years in senior leadership roles at both Fortune 100 companies and early stage startup organizations. This includes 12 years at Microsoft, where she rose to the role of Chief of Staff for Microsoft's worldwide partner group based in Washington, before moving to New Zealand as Microsoft's Director, Small and Mid-Market Solutions and Partners. Misti began her career in the field of journalism and communications as a news director and field reporter at a Fox television affiliate. She has a sincere passion and appreciation for the art of storytelling, which has been the driver behind the work she's done helping children with learning differences find their voice. Misti, great to have you on the show. Perhaps you could just start off by telling us something that not too many people would know about you.
Yeah, I thought about this a little bit, and I was going to go into more detail around when I was a television reporter. And which a lot of people actually don't know that, even though it is in my bio. And I was the co-host of a morning show called The Breakfast Break. And then as soon as I usually share that, then people are like, oh, wow, that's so cool. And I'm like, yeah, but I think our biggest viewership was the local prison I went to Texas A&M University in Texas, and there's a little town called Bryan College Station is where it was at. And so, there's a lot of funny stories, a little bit like a sitcom that happened during that time. But a lot of people don't know that that's where I actually started my career.
Wow. And so did you have a specific focus or any particular interest in the journalism and the work that you did on that show? Yeah.
So I was getting my degree in journalism, a double degree in journalism and communications. And I'd worked for the campus radio station called Campus Journal. And then it also had just been very involved in the journalism department and used to teach video editing. This is when we had the manual, I'm going to age myself a bit, all the annual editing bays. And so the Avid stuff kind of came into play, and I got to learn all of that, which I thought was really cool at the time. And then I was a teaching assistant for my professor, and I loved all the behind the scenes stuff, but I got this role as the on-air talent, and I use that word very loosely. And it was fun. And actually my producer at the time, who's still one of my best friends, Marla, who's in Texas. So it's just one of those times in your life that even though it was quite random and a bit bizarre, but it taught me a lot during a very early age. I was actually still at uni, and then I finished and went on to keep doing that role, and then just decided really quickly that I couldn't stand doing the on-air, being in front of the camera. I was much better behind the scenes. So.
Yeah. And so would that be true that perhaps Marla, was it Marla? Was that your producer?
Yeah.
Was one of your early introductions to a leader that obviously you still have a friendship, so perhaps someone that you looked up to and perhaps learned a lot from?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes what not to do. And I say that with a lot of love and care. She wasn't really into managing people, and she kind of let people know that as well, which was quite funny. But she just did, she did what she needed to do for the role. But you definitely always knew where you stood with Marla, and you still do to this day, which I love that about her.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we talk about learning from experience, and some of the best things we learn are the things not to do. And early on, perhaps it was some of those things that you've now brought forward as not to dos in your leadership roles as you've gone through. So, just casting your mind back to your early days in leadership, Misty, can you just talk us a little bit a bit about how you made that transition and what the scenario was, and what you found that helped you make the transition, and perhaps some of the things that you learned that you might do differently as a result of your experience?
Yeah, so I actually was thinking about this the other day. I was having another conversation with one of my employees on a similar topic. And very early on in my life, I had some very unique leadership experiences. So my family has had their own company for most of my life. And so I learned a lot from my dad, and just free labor, as I used to tell him that he would get us to be able to do. But then kind of some random things happened. So as an example, when I was 15, then I ran a kolache bakery, a Czechoslovakian bakery in Texas. And the only reason I ended up running this bakery was because it was a family friend who owned it, and he was going through a tough time personally. And I did everything. I got there at 4:00 in the morning. I had staff. I made sure that everything was baked on time. And we closed at midday. And my brother would come as well, because my dad, there's no way he would have let me go there by myself at that early hour. And the only reason I bring that up, and there's a couple of other instances as well, is including what I was talking about with when I was a teaching assistant at university, that I think that some of those experiences prepared me. Because if you can imagine, I was 15, 16 years old, running a kolache bakery, and I had people that were in their 20s, 30s, sometimes 40s that were reporting to me. And that was really tough. And to be able to have that, earn that respect as a teenager, which sounds bizarre. I know, looking back, then I definitely tell my daughter now, who will be 15 in a year's time, like, don't do that. There's no reason to try to grow up that quickly. But I was just very, very motivated and very passionate about that. And I love people, and I love being able to help, which was why I also was fine to be able to help this family friend that was going through a rough time. So when I was at Microsoft, then I had an opportunity to take a role as a director for sales in the Western region, so the Western 14 states, to run the Microsoft Dynamics business. So at the time, so ERP, CRM, but it was all very new to Microsoft. And so it was very kind of startup and very scrappy. So we had to hustle a lot in the enterprise. So it was kind of taking these products into the enterprise. So I turn up, I think I was 28, 29 years old at the time. And all of the people that worked for me were way older. They had almost as much experience as as my age. And so I was really nervous about that. And what I did was I just went and front-footed it basically with them, and just, said, this is why I think I was hired for this role, because I understand Microsoft, I understand how to deal with people and customers. And I said, but I need to learn from you. So let's make this a partnership together. So you all are going to be way smarter than when they're coming from SAP and Oracle, and at the time, a bunch of companies that don't exist anymore, and that have all combined, and PeopleSoft. And it was very, it was nerve-wracking. Like, I remember the first time that I had a meeting with the team, and at the time we were quite small. So we went from 4 people to 30 when I left. And I could just tell when I walked into the room, the look on their face, like, are you kidding me? And so who is this person that's not going to be able to do anything? And so I think going into it with a lot of authenticity. So I will probably repeat that word a lot, of being authentic and just not pretending that you're somebody that you're not. And so I just tried to very quickly say, this is where I think I do well, but here's where I need help. And I also, at that time, I had a lot more hang-ups around imposter syndrome and those types of things. And especially being a female, young, in IT, it didn't matter. And so I had all these things, all these insecurities. And as time went on, then I think I was actually able to share some of that with them, which also made me super real. And they had no idea that I had, some of those thoughts in my head. And I guess the only other thing is to quickly show how you can add value to them, especially if you're managing a sales team. they're pretty coin operated. And so if you can quickly show them how you can add value to them, then and for them, then I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. It's interesting. So was your background previous to that in sales? Did you come out of a sales role into a sales management role?
I did. So I joined Microsoft as a business development manager for Office and Windows. Again, this goes back so long ago. And at the time, they basically said, we need to start getting into talking to business decision makers, and instead of just sending by the fax machine and collecting orders. So we actually need to be able to have a real conversation. And because I had experience in doing that, then that's why they hired me for that role. So I was actually the first one at Microsoft to do that role globally. And then we built out a team. And then, so that was kind of a startup thing, which I like startup world. And then we went into, they developed the retail industry solution group, or retail vertical. I joined that team. Again, it was a startup type thing. And then the attractiveness to me for the Dynamics business was definitely that it was startup world. It felt like for Microsoft, the piece that I feel like someone took a chance on me. And I know he did. I know he took a chance on me. That was the leadership part of it. Not that I didn't feel like I wasn't leading before, because I think as a sales leader, and I don't know if we'll get into there's a lot of managers out there that are not leaders. So as we think we've all met them. And there's a lot of leaders out there that are not managers. And so that's something that is, I think a lot of people don't really get or understand. And so that was, for me, that was my background was I knew how to get things done at Microsoft. And I also had a unique skill, people thought at the time, of being able to get access to the C-suite, which back in that time wasn't as popular of a skill set at Microsoft. And so that was just something that and then being able to kind of help the team within that place. Because if you can imagine the people that I was that are going to report into me, they had to be able to get to the C-suite whenever you're selling those types of business applications. So
yeah, wow, that's man, there's a whole bunch in there to unpack, Misty. So I'd like to just kind of wind that back a bit and just ask you a couple of questions about some of the things that you talked about. You talked about authenticity, and you said you use that word quite often. One of the big challenges I find with this term authenticity is it's kind of become a bit of almost like a cliche. But I get the feeling from you that you have a real kind of sense of what authenticity means, and you touched on it a little bit, which is putting yourself out there. And you went to when you first went into that role, you went to the people that you had reporting into you and said, "Hey, this is why I think they put me here, and I need your help." And could you just talk to me a little bit about what you mean by authenticity and how a leader that's looking to develop that for themselves might be a little bit more authentic or work towards that?
So we all hear the term fake it till you make it, which I say that as well, kind of as a joke, but I think it's probably the opposite of that. And maybe when I think of authenticity, then I really try hard. Actually, I don't try hard. I think it just comes naturally to just be me. And so just to not, when I go into a situation, whether it's a meeting with a customer or with employees or what have you, I mean, we obviously have our own, we change a bit and there's different personas and things that you might act a little bit differently towards. But I think if you were to ask 5 people in my life or however many people, then you'll probably get very similar answers as far as what they think I am. I don't kind of have a different facade for different situations. And so authenticity to me is probably most importantly that you are really thinking about who you're speaking with and who you're around, and that you actually care. And I know I'll also say some things too that not everyone agrees with, but I think it's a good thing to lead with love and to lead with grace and empathy. And I said this I was speaking at a Asia Pac leadership conference. It's around this time last year, actually. And I remember, and it was a panel, and everyone on the panel was way more senior than I am, and way bigger roles, and across Asia Pacific. And I remember making this statement, and I had so many people reach out to me. I probably had about 50. I don't know, there are 1,000 or so folks that were on the call. And they were like, we are so grateful that you said that that's something that you stand by, to lead with love and to be kind. And I know, because it's sometimes from a leadership perspective or different roles, and people are like, oh, you've got to kind of be, super hard, or yeah, but I don't think you have to. I don't think you have to be that. And anyway, it's something for me that I don't really think about being authentic all the time. I think you just are authentic. If you have to overthink it, then that's probably not authenticity, in my opinion.
Yeah, and perhaps one of the things that I've got out of that is that you're talking into how you're feeling and how you assess the situation, rather than trying to put this facade up of being everything's under control. I fully know what's going on, as opposed to, hey, we're in this together. I've got this role, which is the kind of the leader of but I can't do it without you. And that's more around the authenticity, which is why you always present Misty. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah. No, I think. There? Yeah, no. I think it is, and I'm human. I mean, obviously, I have some things. I just had to speak recently at a conference, and I always get super nervous, and it doesn't matter how many times I've done it or how big the audience is. And then I had to remind myself. So these are like little conversations I have within my own head of, it doesn't matter. Like you're so much more worried about like what happens. What if you fall down as you're walking up there? Then hopefully you won't get hurt, but it'll probably be funny. And I think also too, not taking yourself very seriously. So and just being able to have a laugh at your own expense, which I do that all the time. And I do that in my personal life and my work life. And I just don't really take things super seriously. Now, there's a time to be serious, don't get me wrong. But for the most part, then I think that there should be a lot of lightheartedness and fun wrapped up. Life's just too short to not have that.
Yeah, and you spend a lot of time at work, right? So
yeah, you do.
Keeping it a bit lighter when you can is a really good thing. One of the other things you talked about was imposter syndrome. And I'd like to just dig into that a little bit, because that's I believe that's a really big deal, and it comes back to that, the facade that we tend to put across the front, which is, hey, I've been put into this role, therefore the person that's put me there thinks that I can do it, as opposed to they're giving me a chance, taking a chance on me, and then to help me succeed and grow and as a leader. But I've been there with imposter syndrome. How was it for you, and what did you do to try and help alleviate? Because it can be incredibly debilitating and make you feel really alone. How have you handled imposter syndrome, and is there anything there that you'd advise for leaders that are going through or feeling inadequate or wondering why they should be there? What you might advise them?
I just had this exact conversation recently with a young lady that I've been mentoring for a while, super talented. And I just told her, I said, you are way more talented and clever and amazing than you give yourself credit for. And we had this whole discussion around imposter syndrome. And I told the story, again, going back to that time. It was quite a pivotal time for me in my late 20s when I took on that role. Prior to that role, then I had just won an award at Microsoft. And at the time, when Bill Gates was a lot more involved, and it was the chairman's award. And so I got to have dinner with him and photos and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't think I was deserving of that award, not because I didn't think I'd done a good job, but I was like, gosh, I'm getting a lot of credit as the sales rep, but there's actually a big, massive team that's helped to make all this happen. So I had a real hard time kind of coming to grips with it. And then I got asked to do this role, or asked to interview. And then I went and interviewed and competed and was able to get the role. And somebody said to me, and they were maybe joking, maybe it was maybe not joking, about that because I had relationships with executives, that's why I won the chairman's award. And then that's why I had been afforded this opportunity at such a young age. And it really hurt. And I didn't even really know how to take it. It was in a kind of a a social setting, sort of, but it definitely played into my whole imposter syndrome kind of stuff that was in my head. So it probably took me way too long, so 5-6 years, to get through and actually think, yeah, actually I deserved that role. I worked really hard for that role. I was really successful. The team was really successful. We did a good job for the company. And then that, kind of catapulted into my next role and next roles and those types of experiences. And I think taking people's feedback, if it's negative, with a grain of salt, and also understanding that in hindsight, I have no idea, the person who made that comment to me, what she was going through in her life at that time. And that comment was probably more of a reflection upon herself versus having anything to do with me. And so that's probably how I've dealt with that, more so than anything. But I do encourage, and the young lady that I'm mentoring, I was like, if you can just get rid of kill imposter syndrome or whatever that's going on in your head is sooner rather than later, it will free you so much, because it is really draining. It's extremely draining. And I don't really find that I have it as much anymore. There will be some times I'll get asked to do something that, and I find it's probably more nervousness than anything else. And also just not wanting to let people down who I feel like are asking me to do something that's maybe outside of my comfort zone. But yeah, imposter syndrome is a horrible, horrible thing that it's just good to just kill it as soon as you can.
Did you have any tactics or strategies for killing it? Was it reaching out to other people? Did you just kind of work it through in your own head? Was there anything specific you did there? I just think it's such a big deal for so many people, and so many of us, especially new in leadership, but as we grow and get bigger and bigger roles, it can keep coming back. And my experience personally is I tended to keep it inside, where actually I've found it's better to talk about it. And
100%.
Someone else can look from the outside and go, don't be stupid,
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're spot on, Campbell. Absolutely. That being able to talk about it, I think surrounding yourself with good, strong leaders, good people that you can give you a straight answer and be honest about what's happening, but then also too, when you're being too hard on yourself or feeling a bit insecure about something, or you're letting the imposter syndrome stuff take over, then just to kind of, pull your head in. And I mean, not that you're saying that to yourself, but your friends, having people around you that can have that, and also that will take that feedback as well. So having that going both ways. I mean, I've got some very, very fortunate to have some really close girlfriends and some kind of my best friends are men as well. And the 9 times out of 10, like probably the common thread or theme throughout all those relationships is we are so upfront and blunt, sometimes brutally honest with things, but I always take that with knowing that they do that because they care about me and vice versa. So I think having good, strong mentors, and also just being able to have at least a couple of people in your life, or even just one that that you can go to and get a straight answer out of that. So yeah, it took me way too long. If I had that to do over again, then I would have tried to work my way out of that, whether that's through, getting a coach or a therapist or something, just to kind of get that out of my brain, because it's typically some sort of baggage that you're carrying that's kind of, brought you to that point anyway. But if you can figure that out, then it's very freeing.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds really powerful to me, and it kind of comes back to that whole connection piece, and being able to early on in your career, leadership career, whichever way you go in your career, is to have people around you who can both advise you around where perhaps you could make better decisions, but also help point you at the things that you're missing completely, and that you trust, and that you know that they're going to give you the honest advice. And it's not that's not just something that you have with anyone, right? There's a few relationships that you build and grow over time that can really help with that. There's a saying that goes something like, and I'm going to completely mess this up, but don't take criticism from anyone you wouldn't take advice from. And it's a really perhaps a way to frame it up.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's kind of like, this is a little bit of a non sequitur, but it reminds me of a little bit. If you're shopping and you decide you want to buy a new outfit, don't ever buy an outfit that's on sale that you wouldn't pay for full price. So it's very, it's a little bit in a different way to look at it.
Yeah. That's putting a bit of space between the impulse and the decision, right?
Yeah, 100%.
That's a brilliant metaphor for so many of the decisions that we make, where we make impulse decisions, where if we step back and just had either someone look in from the outside or took it, that's why sleeping on it's so powerful, because you can come back and have a look at it in the cold light of day. And perhaps another reason why when you feel like you want to do something like yell at someone or send a really grumpy...
I was about to say, always wait to hit send or send it to somebody else and say, what do you think? I have my team does that all the time. They'll send me if they're upset about something, and they'll say, what do you think about this? And so just to make sure that it doesn't sound too harsh or mean or what have you. Yeah.
It's really easy for written communication in particular to have, because it's got no context around it. We tend to read it more negatively than is intended probably by the person, and so you kind of have to step the level of positivity up to get it to neutral. And if you're grumpy and you send something that's slightly grumpy, it can be read really badly and end up blowing.
Yeah.
One of the other things that you talked about was management, or managing versus leading, and that you can have a really good manager who's not a good leader, or you can have a good manager that's not a good leader, and you can have a good leader who's not a good manager. Perhaps you could just talk a little bit into that, so that I can get a feel for, and anyone that's listening can get a feel for the difference and how you might become good at both.
Okay, so I'll start with some experiences of not good management, which I do think it's challenging. If you're not a good manager, you're typically not a good leader. I think those two need to kind of go in the same thing. But you will have some really great leaders who are not managing, actually managing people. So one of the things that I had a manager at one stage, and every single time we would have a one-on-one, if they didn't cancel it, then the whole time that we'd be talking, they would be on their computer and not taking notes out of all the wonderful things coming out of my mouth. It was just completely being like answering emails or doing something. So just seemed completely disinterested. And I think that kind of ties back to, if you don't actually want to manage people, because if you're not interested in that actual job, don't do it. And because you won't get to the leadership piece that you want to get to, and it'll be unfulfilling for you as well. And so there's no reason to go and do that. From a leadership perspective, then I think it's one of those things that I always ask myself when someone's having a challenging time from a leadership perspective, have they ever really been taught the skills or how to exercise that muscle, so to speak, in our brains? And it's a bit challenging. I mean, I've got a situation right now at work that, we've got some new managers and they're struggling. And I was having this conversation with one of my leaders and said, we haven't taught them how to manage. And they actually have good leadership skills, but they're drowning in management right now. And they knew how to do leadership from an individual contributor role, which should translate. However, if you get bogged down into some of the management stuff and we haven't actually taught you principles or management excellence and those types of things, then it's really hard to calibrate that. And so we have to, I think we're doing a disservice if we don't, as leaders, help bring others along. And then remind yourself, you were in that position at one stage. You're not born to say, I'm going to go and lead this. That doesn't come out. I mean, some people are more naturally born leaders. Yes, I agree with that. However, even the most natural leaders on the planet, guarantee you, they will not tell you that it's just been an epiphany with no experience and no point of reference. So we all have to learn and kind of start somewhere. So I always typically ask, do they even realize? So are they consciously incompetent, or are they unconsciously incompetent? And I know that sounds really harsh to say incompetent. However, it's a good measurement to find out how you can possibly help. Because if somebody's unconsciously incompetent, it's going to be really hard to help them unless they are open to that type of feedback. Sorry, opposite of that. If somebody's unconsciously incompetent, you can probably have a chance at being able to help them from a leadership. But if they're consciously incompetent, or they think that they're smashing it and they're just, kind of wreaking havoc all over the place, it makes it super, super challenging. And so I think just having that openness and being able to help others, in this example that I'm talking about from a work perspective, then none of these people report into me, but I want us to have good leadership at Palo Alto Networks. I want us to build good, strong people. I mean, the best thing about this company is the culture. And if all of us, the only reason why culture stays good is by people caring. And so.
Yeah. How do you define the difference between leadership and management, Misty?
So
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, because if I asked 100 people, I'll probably get 100 different answers, right?
Yeah.
Just interested in your view.
So when I think of management, then I think of kind of a textbook terminology. You're managing people, and that is, and all the different lovely things that go along within that, as far as pay rises and all the administrative type things that have to happen within that, performance reviews, which actually shouldn't be administrative, should be a meaningful conversation. But and some people actually take a job because they think that's the only way I can progress in my career is via management. But I have lots of conversations with people around, don't do that if you don't actually enjoy managing. As I mentioned earlier, if you don't really enjoy that piece of it, and don't do it, because it can be exhausting, especially depending upon the people that you're managing. And so that's kind of I look at that as like, it's just I was going to say a job. I know they're all jobs or whatever, but management is just kind of a role, a job. Leadership to me is not, I know a lot of people are like inspirational leaders and all those different types of things, but it's more of, when I think about leadership, then typically it's, what legacy are you looking to leave? Not that I'm just, as those words came out of my mouth, and I don't actually think like that, but I'm trying to put in my head how, when I think about leadership overall, then it's during this time, or during, what are the things that you can do that are going to actually inspire people to be happier, healthier, better, from a contribution to themselves, to society, to their families. And so that kind of humanistic piece of it, that's what I think about leadership. And typically the leadership piece will turn into results. It's kind of like when people talk about, do I focus on strategy or do I focus on culture? And I always say culture first. And I know that there's the whole, people way smarter than me have written books and all that stuff around that. It's a similar type thing. Do I focus on leadership or do I focus on management? Well, you've got to kind of focus on both. But if you're in a position and you, as I mentioned, anyone can be a leader. And that's the thing that I think people don't quite understand, that it's actually something I'm just going back and thinking of past experiences of some of the most amazing leaders that I've worked for. And they just had a sincere passion about people and growing people and being able to help. But also quite hard charging and, had big, bold goals and all those different types of things. So, it's a conversation I think that should be talked about a lot more, especially with people who are in those types of positions.
Yeah. Yeah. So from your perspective, the management's more the administrative piece, the kind of the structural piece, whereas the leadership's around obviously going forward and setting the vision and taking people on the journey with you, but it's really centered around the humanistic part of your team, as opposed to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like as an example, most US multinationals are quite matrixed in countries, and we're the same at Palo Alto Networks, the same at Microsoft. And so I don't, as the leader for New Zealand, then I don't have every single person that reports directly into me. But if you ask anybody, although I always tell them that I work for them probably more than they work for me, but I definitely, everyone treats me as if I'm the leader of the organization. And however, I also have we have such a high level of trust on the team that I think is super important and a super massive component ingredient to leadership, that they also know that if there's something that they need to talk to me about, whether it's something that I've done to upset them or they disagree or what have you, then you've got to be able to have that kind of open communication as well. So it's not like, and when I think of leadership, and sometimes people think of it as a hierarchy. So like leadership way up here and everyone else way down. But I think all that's BS. And so at the end of the day, someone has to front up and do the stuff that I guarantee nobody else on the team is probably going to want to do from a leadership perspective. However, it's not a hierarchical thing at all. It's and they know that I can't do my job unless they're successful, and that I'm completely going to have their back on anything that they want to do. So I think those are just kind of the way, just kind of natural things that I think, natural skills that leaders should have. And the great leaders that I've worked with and had the good fortune of being able to be influenced by, then they've all had that in spades.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a bunch of things that have come out from your comments, Misty, and that trust, and although you haven't used the word, that kind of sense of safety. So you've got people's backs, that they can have a robust conversation with you without fear of reprisal, because it's the most important thing is what's right, not who's right. And it often isn't me. When if I'm talking personally about me, it's often not me. It may be someone else, and often is someone else that's got all the answers. Hopefully I've got a few of the questions. Just before we wrap up, a couple of things. In terms of one of the big challenges is a lot of new leaders get put into a role, and rather than being well supported across into that role, they've been perhaps the best technical person in the team, best salesperson, best network engineer, whatever their technical capability is, and they end up running the team without a whole lot of support. What advice would you give to leaders of leaders that have just been put into new roles to help their new leader they've put in that role, give them the best chance of success? So what, the leader of the leader, what should they be doing to support that new leader into their role?
I think that's a really important question that probably is something that is underserved in action, because a lot of times a leader of leaders will automatically assume that person that they put in that role, they've got that, and that they're fine, that there's a reason they put them in there, and they're maybe quite confident in their decision-making skills and what's made them successful. So I've just put this great person in, and off we go. One thing I think to really pay attention to, if it is a battlefield promotion, so if you are taking someone from a team and elevating them to lead that team that they were just a peer of, then I think that you've got to really make sure that all the team dynamics and communication is very open and transparent, and getting people to, especially if you've had other people on the team that have gone for that role as well, and being able to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to air out how they're feeling about things. And there'll be certain instances that someone might be so upset that they're going to leave the team, and that's life, and it's gonna happen in different times. But I always put things, I have a really simplistic way of thinking about things, and that it comes back down to communication and being able to actually go into it with an open mind, and being able to make sure that you're listening fully to everything that's going on, everything that's happening, active listening, and make sure that you're helping the new leader to actually put a plan in place and being able to front foot things. So if you're walking into a situation that might be a bit tricky like that, then role play with them, sit down and have that. I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but I've done this so many times, and front foot all of those courageous conversations from the very beginning. And the new leader of the team that coach them as their leader, this is your opportunity to go in and lead this team in the way that you see fit. And I'm here, I've got your back. I'm here to catch you if you fall, or to let's, have our own conversation to be able to go through some tough situations within the team, or what have you. So, It is different. It is different, I think, managing managers or managing leaders managing leaders. But I think that there's still a lot of principles just from an overall leadership perspective that can be used within that piece as well.
Yeah, great. Yeah, make sure that the communication lines are open. Make sure that the new leader you've put into that role recognizes they can come and have a conversation with you, and that maybe they can even, hopefully, ideally, they can talk to you about some of the fears and frustrations and doubts that they have about their ability to do the job, the reason why they're even in the role. Going back to that whole imposter syndrome thing, sounds like that's the kind of thing that you really want to set up between a leader's leader and the new leader, so that they've got an environment that they've got a chance to grow and learn quickly, and rather than having to flounder around and work it out for themselves.
Yeah, and bring in outside consultants if you need to. When I came here originally with Microsoft, then I brought in an outside group. I mean, it was quite it was different culturally. I'm moving from the States. Who's this American lady that's come in, and why did we not hire someone within the country? And anyway, so I just kind of tackled it head on to say, this is what team, what do we want to be about as a team? So helping someone who's got a new team to be able to do that. And again, just kind of underemphasize, make sure that they know that you've got their back and that you're there to help them, and that you're all, we're all on one team together. So, and also too, don't take things so seriously. I always have a saying that's like, we're not curing cancer. We're not doing open heart surgery. At the end of the day, let's get on with this, because it's, is it really that important? Are we really getting hung up on things that are not that important? So.
Misti, that's fantastic. Just before we wrap up, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have?
The only thing I was just curious about is leadership fun? So or is leading fun? So that was something that I was thinking about earlier, that's probably a question I would have asked, but I always ask the fun factor of everything in life. And I think it can be, I think it should be. If it's not fun, then you probably need to reevaluate what you're doing and interject some fun into it.
Yeah, brilliant. Misti, that's been fantastic. Appreciate your openness and great insight and wisdom. Thanks very much, and look forward to having you back on the show at some point.
Thanks, Campbell.
It's been great. See ya. Thanks for listening. If you have a friend or a colleague who would benefit from this episode, please pass the word along. If you have a friend or a colleague who would not benefit, but you haven't been in touch with them for a while, give them a call. iTunes reviews are great to get the word out and to help me create the show that's most useful for you. And if you're frustrated or having challenges or would like some help, guidance, assistance with your first leadership role, then check out integrationcatalyst.com in the link in the podcast notes below. Or pass this on to your boss to nudge them to get you the help you really need to cross the doing to managing chasm and get you powered up on your leadership and management journey. Oh, and if you want to make sure you don't miss an episode, hit subscribe. Until next time.